Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the astrological chart of Diane Keaton. As I record this in October of 2025, she recently passed away, and it gave me the idea to do her chart. I am most familiar with her from the movie Annie Hall. That's one of my favorite movies, and she won an Oscar for that. She was in several Woody Allen movies. She was in Play It Again, Sam, and Sleeper. I've seen those multiple times. Love those movies too. Love and Death. And she was in Manhattan that he also made. But the other movies that I've seen her in are Looking for Mr. Goodbar, and that was 1977, Shoot the Moon, 1982, and The First Wives Club, 96. More recently, The Book Club, which was 2018. I thought she was in both book clubs because there was a sequel that I saw. But anyway, she was in many more movies than that. Oh, and she was also in Interiors. That was another Woody Allen movie. But like I'm trying to think of other big movies that she was in. Baby Boom. Yeah, I think that had a good box office too. 1987. I think I saw that. But anyway, Reds. I think that was with Warren Beatty, and she was actually romantically involved with Warren Beatty. So that's probably where they met. That was 1981. So she had a long career, and the thing that she was known for was being kind of eccentric. And she even said, because I was looking at Wikipedia, that she was kind of known at the beginning as being this kooky actress. Like that's how they kind of pegged her. And yet she was a Capricorn. So her birthday was January 5th, 1946. So how does a Capricorn get to be known as somebody that's eccentric? What is the first influence that we think of when we think of people that are different? Well, there's going to be it's going to be two influences. First of all, Aquarius and its ruler Uranus. And so if we look at the chart and we see, is there anything that supports that? And by the way, she never married, which I think is very unusual for somebody born in 1946. So I'm assuming she's a boomer. I actually found out that I think 1946 might have been the dividing mark of boomers because it was post-World War II. But, people like John Lennon, a lot of the rock stars or movie stars that were still considered very hip in the 60s and 70s, they were actually the generation before the boomers. So, boomer, now they say, okay, boomer, like the person is like from this way older generation and they're out of touch. But, some of these other people are even older than that. And so she was very unusual for not being married. And sure enough, she had her moon in Aquarius. And another thing that Diane Keaton is known for is her fashion sense. She always dressed in a style that was like men's inspired clothing. Now you could say, well, women can wear, jeans and all these, pants and stuff. So how could it be men inspired? Well, she would wear, and I'm talking about like in the 70s, that was for Annie Hall, like a vest with a tie and like kind of like a shirt that, women can wear, but kind of like a tailored, like a white shirt that's got, with cuffs and everything. That just became like a big fad in the latter part of the 70s. But I think she continued to wear those kind of clothes for the rest of her life. And I don't think, and she really wasn't like that before. It was something that she just kind of created. I don't know if she created it for her character in Annie Hall. That's a possibility. And by the way, that movie was very autobiographical, probably for Woody and based on her, because her actual last name is Hall, not Keaton. Her mother's maiden name was Keaton, so the only reason she used that Hall was because, Keaton was because there was already a Diane Hall in the in the acting business, so she had to differentiate herself. So she probably created it for that role. And what I can say, looking at her chart, so her sun is in Capricorn, her moon is in Aquarius, her Mercury is in Sagittarius. And it's important to note that Sagittarius and Aquarius are both signs that are connected with freedom and rebellion, kind of breaking out of the boxes that we are put in. And being a sun in Capricorn, Capricorn is a traditional sign, and it rules the 10th house, which is all about status and your place in society. What you could say that is status and your success and all of that. And it's very traditional. Saturn, the ruler, is connected to authority figures. So how does someone reconcile that? Well, I think she was a child. We could say she was a child of the 60s. And therefore, that was what was happening. That was kind of in the air. So that anybody, doesn't matter if they were born a Capricorn or some of the more, the traditional signs like Capricorn or Cancer or Taurus or something like that, you are affected by the times that you live in. And after the 50s, being so, if I wasn't born in the 50s, but you can see by watching those old films, what it was like. And people were just raring to go in the 60s. So I'm sure, and Mercury can be your mindset, the way that you think, and she was thinking like a Sagittarian. Her Venus was in Capricorn, and her Mars was in Cancer. So that was kind of surprising to me that she had so much of this. And it also surprised me that her ascendant was Scorpio. And one reason it surprised me the most is because physically, I always thought she was an attractive woman. And when she was younger, she was, because I think she dyed her hair like a real, like kind of a platinum white color, but her natural color, I think, was brown. Like she had kind of a brownish, but I always thought she had a beautiful face. But she was very waspy. She seemed like a, which stands for white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And kind of that look, which you could say is kind of a Capricornian type of a thing, which is more like preppy than sultry, And so the fact that she had Scorpio rising is kind of curious to me. It might have been, but she had an allure. So maybe in spite of her looks, she still managed to come across in a very alluring kind of way. And I think too, in terms of her persona, if you will, she wasn't really one of those people that, was in the tabloids all the time. And it's interesting because her midheaven is in Leo, which means that even as a Capricorn, it was almost like she was destined to make that her profession. The midheaven is the cusp of the 10th house of career. And you can look at that, and with some people, who, if you were just to look at their chart and you didn't know who they were, you wouldn't automatically think, okay, this person is going to be in show business. But when you have a Leo midheaven, it's like going to really be calling out to you, because you're going to be attracted to that as, and I would say that somebody like her might actually be quite shy off camera, off stage, and that's where she kind of lit up, was in front of people. In terms of that fashion sense, you know, her moon is in Aquarius and she has Uranus in the seventh house, which is the house of committed partnership. And of course, I said before, she never got married. So Uranus is that planet of freedom and also being unconventional in one's attitude towards relationships. So that makes perfect sense. However, some people may not realize that the seventh house is also public relations, and also so how you, in a way you could say it's like your public image. And your Uranian, she has a Uranian, or she had a Uranian public image. She was different. When I look at Uranus in terms of her, other things that were going on, she had an opposition from Mercury, and she had a trine from the moon. And I feel like people who have a well-aspected, or, like who have a friendly angle between the moon and Uranus, that they tend to have a really good ability to interact with people in relationships without there being that kind of possessiveness. Because if you think about it, even with friendships, there can sometimes be, some people who are very overbearing in their platonic relationships, or with their siblings, with people that are not their romantic partners too. And it's like, it can be a little bit tedious. And I think that she was a good friend, because I was reading a tribute by Goldie Hawn and suggested that she had a lot of female friends that were close to her, that were kind of a group. So that might suggest that kind of thing. One thing that I noticed, and this is always interesting with artists, is that she had a stellium in the second house of earned income. She had Mercury there, Venus, and the Sun. The reason that this is interesting to me is that she has no planets in the fifth house. But it is, one thing I will say about her fifth house is that it encompasses both a smidgen of Pisces as well as a lot of Aries. And these are both creative signs. So that in and of itself might suggest, actually her fifth house cusp is a late degree of Pisces. So Pisces is ruled by Neptune, and Neptune rules photography, and the film industry obviously would fall under that. But in terms of that stellium in the second house, especially, when you have your Sun and Venus there, that can indicate somebody who really identifies with the money that they make. Like, it gives them that sense of self-esteem. And Venus there can also be somebody who loves luxury. Now, I don't know that that is the case for her. Capricorn is not one of those signs. Capricorn is a sign that is associated with wanting quality goods and also status symbols. to show, to be symbolic of the person's status in society as well as their success. But it's not excessive where, I mean, of course, there are always outliers. I just looked up her net worth. Of course, we don't know if this is accurate, but I guess she had a $29 million home that she sold months before her death. So I guess, she did have, that is pretty extravagant. And I guess she had a net worth of $100 million. So that doesn't really surprise me because of the fact that what I just said, that she has the stellium in the second house. So I would imagine, and I said she had the sun and Venus there, but also Mercury. Mercury to me is like crunching the numbers, the natural accountant or something like that, who's really good, has a head for figures, that kind of person. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Probably investments and things like that, because I think of her as somebody who was a real um, artist, because the kind of movies that she made, yeah, you could say First Wives Club was kind of like very commercial type of movie. Even something like the Godfather uh, franchise that it turned out to be, but that was by Francis Ford uh, Coppola, Coppola, and he was very artistic. So she seemed to be in a lot of quality movies. She wasn't just going into everything, and of course she probably wouldn't have been cast in, the blatantly commercial movies, but still, I still think that she probably was very savvy when it came to investments and things like that. But anyway, the other thing that the second house indicates can be self-worth along with your net worth. So when you have the sun and Venus in conjunction there, I would guess that she was very self confident in her own way, in terms of or having a lot of self-esteem. And I think it speaks volumes that she never got married, and I guess for the last 15 years of her life she was never had any romantic involvement, because I know that a lot of women do tend to get involved in relationships maybe to boost their self-esteem. I'm not saying everyone, but sometimes that is what happens. I think women do tend to do that sometimes. And for a woman to kind of stand on her own 2 feet and take care of herself, I think is very admirable. And I think Capricorns do tend to be loners a lot of times. That's my guess, is that there's kind of this stoicism. And so, interestingly, even though she was single her whole life, or not married, she did have 2 children that she adopted in her 50s. And that was unusual because, I mean, who does that, right? Who even has children in their 50s period? That's not common at all. Her Mars was in Cancer. If a woman has her Mars in Cancer, she may have a strong drive towards motherhood. Cancer is a sign of the mother. So I believe that she was someone who really eventually, it was late in life, but she eventually did that. Another thing that I see here is that she had 3 placements in the 11th house. She had Neptune, Chiron, and Jupiter. It's interesting about Chiron because I also have Chiron in the 11th house, so I know about this placement. And it can be this woundedness involving groups, like the person may feel like they're on the outside looking in. So she probably did feel, and of course, having the moon in Aquarius, for a woman, I think in Vedic astrology especially, the moon is very influential. So, given what is happening, with this, I do believe that she probably was always a little bit different. Having a prominent Aquarius, you could say that she was ahead of her time. And just in her way of thinking with Mercury and Sagittarius and Neptune in the 11th. The 11th, I was trying to find information to support that, what I'm about to say, because it really, when I'm looking up stuff, I don't like bookmark it and figure out what source I'm getting it from. I'm just trying to get a feel for different positions. I remember reading about the 11th house years ago and them saying, but this was online material, and them saying that it was part of the film industry and that sort of thing. And then I think they even said the internet. Well, Neptune is connected to photography. So, and this is the house of the collective. So when you have Neptune in the 11th house, it does suggest to me somebody who's a film actress or actor or whatever, whose creativity is going out to the masses. You can be a painter and you can have a little gallery and you might sell some paintings and maybe you even make a living from it, but you're not really well known. This to me suggests somebody who's well known. And Jupiter here can be, receiving a lot of luck from your friends and associates. I think it's also good for popularity, where a person maybe has a lot of friends is because they are very likable, or they have like a wide, even beyond just popularity, but just this access to a lot of people. So through networking, and of course, if you're in that sort of business, show business, you have people from Broadway, you have people from Hollywood, all over the place. Going back to that kind of masculine style of dress, I think that in the first place, I think sometimes fashion is determined by a person's desire to express themselves creatively. And when you have the moon in Aquarius, the way that you express yourself creatively can be quite unusual. It can be ahead of its time. It can be something that really clashes with the norms. And yet, at the same time, it can be a trendsetter. That's one of the things when people have I fully expected that you would have Aquarius rising, because people with Aquarius rising, they can be like ahead of those trends. But she managed to do so anyway. And the masculine, first of all, Aquarius is a masculine sign too. That's another thing to note. But I would say, I would point to her Capricorn influence, because in that conjunction between the Sun and Venus, because Capricorn is the sign that, if you think about somebody like David Bowie, who was a Sun in Capricorn, and actually that's interesting because David Bowie had Aquarius rising. I don't think I've done him. I'll have to do his. And he had Aquarius rising, and he really embodied that, almost like that alien being, Ziggy Stardust, which is kind of, that's science fiction-y, and that's very Uranian. So, but he started gravitating towards wearing those suits, being very dapper and really impeccably dressed. Well, Diane Keaton did the same thing, only she was a woman. She had the suits and the whatever. That's what she would wear. Those, what we would say are more masculine attire, but given her Capricorn nature, they're just very, I don't know what word I want to use, like business type of outfits, pinstripe suits, that kind of thing. Formal wear. I don't know how to articulate it, but I think you know what I mean. Okay, I think I have said enough about this chart for now. Thanks for listening. If you'd like a private reading, please click on the link below. Take care. Bye.